The eviction notice on my apartment door was less of a warning and more of a countdown timer to rock bottom. 2 weeks. That's all I had after the company I'd given 5 years to decided my position was redundant. Redundant. That's a cold corporate word for useless. So, there I was, scrolling through the digital graveyard of Craigslist, my diet consisting of instant noodles and pure desperation. Most ads were scams or pyramid schemes, but then one caught my eye. It was simple, almost too simple. Nightshift janitor needed, Crescent Mall Theater, excellent pay. No experience necessary. The Crescent Mall had been a ghost town for years, a relic of the 90s that the city forgot to tear down. The idea of working there was odd. But excellent pay and no experience were the two most beautiful phrases in the English language to a guy like me. I sent a quick email, not expecting much. To my surprise, a reply came back in under 10 minutes. Interview tonight, 9 p.m. Ask for Mr. Blackwood. Pulling into the mall's cracked and weed-choked parking lot felt like arriving at a crime scene. The only lights on were the ones for the theater, its old sign flickering weakly, casting a sickly yellow glow on the pavement. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of stale popcorn and something else, something like dust and old paper. A tall, unnaturally thin man in a dated 3-piece suit stood behind the concession stand, polishing a glass display case that hadn't held candy in a decade. "Leo?" he asked, his voice dry as autumn leaves. He didn't look up. "Yes, sir, here for the interview." He finally turned, and I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. Mr. Blackwood's eyes weren't unkind, but they didn't seem to focus on me. It was like he was looking at the space just behind my left shoulder. He didn't ask about my work history or why I needed the job. He didn't care. His questions were different. "Can you follow instructions, Leo?" he asked, his gaze still fixed on that empty space. "Precisely as they are given, without question." "Yes, of course. Good. Your personal judgment is not required here. Your obedience is." He reached under the counter and produced a single laminated sheet of paper. It felt strangely heavy in my hand. "These are your duties, your orientation. Memorize them." I looked down at the typed list. It wasn't a list of cleaning tasks. It was a list of rules. 7 of them. Rule 1. All cleaning must be completed between midnight and 5 a.m. You must be out of the building before the sun rises. Rule 2. Theater 2's door must be kept locked at all times. If you find it unlocked, lock it immediately. Do not look inside. Rule 3. If the lobby intercom begins to play warped carnival-like music, freeze. Do not move a muscle until it stops, no matter what you see or hear. Rule 4. The rear emergency exit is not for your use. If you hear someone knocking or calling for help from the other side, ignore it. They are not in danger. You are. Rule 5. You may see figures in your peripheral vision in the lobby. They are part of the show. Do not acknowledge them. Rule 6. Do not investigate any sounds coming from the projection booths. They are automated. Rule 7. Theater 9 does not exist. If you see a door for it, you are overtired. Go home immediately. I read the list twice. My heart was thumping a nervous rhythm against my ribs. This was insane. This had to be some kind of elaborate prank, but the pay he'd mentioned in the email could cover my rent 3 times over. I understand," I stammered, my voice sounding small in the vast, empty lobby. Mr. Blackwood gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. He slid a simple employment form and a pen across the counter. It wasn't a contract, just a single page with a line for my name and a signature, below a sentence that read, "I agree to abide by all house rules." I signed it. My hand was shaking. I hurrah. He took the paper, folded it once, and slid it into his pocket without looking. Then he handed me a single, old-fashioned brass key. "You start tomorrow night. The rules are not suggestions, Leo. They are your reality now. Don't be late." And that was it. I walked out of the Crescent Mall Theater with a job, a key, and a laminated sheet of madness. As I drove away, I glanced in my rearview mirror. The single light in the manager's office window clicked off, plunging the entire building back into darkness. It felt like I hadn't just gotten a job. It felt like I'd just been bought. My first night was a joke, an absolute bore. I mopped the sticky lobby floors, emptied trash cans filled with nothing but dust bunnies, and wiped down counters that hadn't been touched in years. The silence was absolute, broken only by the squeak of my shoes and the hum of the ancient ice machine. I kept glancing at the laminated rules in my pocket, feeling more foolish with every passing hour. A rule about warped carnival music? A warning about a non-existent theater? It had to be some weird hazing ritual, a test concocted by a lonely, eccentric manager. I almost laughed. By the time I locked up and walked out into the pre-dawn gray, I was convinced the only thing haunting this place was a desperate need for customers. The second night felt different. The air in the lobby was colder, heavier. The usual scent of stale popcorn was overlaid with something else, a faint, metallic tang, like old blood or rust. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it was just my imagination, spooked by the strange rules. I started my rounds, pushing my cart of cleaning supplies down the long, carpeted hallway that led to the theaters. That's when I saw it. The door to Theater 2 was slightly ajar, a sliver of perfect, impenetrable darkness visible in the gap. My blood ran cold. The first night, I had checked this door specifically, and it was sealed tight. Now, it was open. Every instinct screamed at me to peek inside, to see what was so important that it had its own rule. Just a quick look. What could it hurt? But Mr. Blackwood's dry voice echoed in my head. Your obedience is required. My hand trembled as I reached for the handle. I pushed the heavy door shut, refusing to look into the darkness beyond. The lock made a loud, definitive click that echoed down the hall. For a second, I thought I heard a soft sigh from inside, like someone settling into a comfortable chair. I told myself it was just the building settling, and hurried away. Later, I was polishing the glass of the concession stand, trying to get my heart rate back to normal, when it started. A sound, faint at first, then growing louder, filled the lobby. It was the intercom, and it was playing music. It wasn't just music, it was a nightmare melody, the sound of a calliope, but every note was sour, bent out of shape, as if the machine playing it was melting. Rule 3. Freeze. Do not move a muscle. I froze instantly, my hand hovering over the glass, the polishing rag still clutched in my fist. The music twisted and churned, a cheerful tune made monstrous. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a shadow in the hallway detach from the wall, stretch like taffy, and slide silently across the floor before vanishing. I didn't dare turn my head. I squeezed my eyes shut and waited, my body rigid with terror, until the last distorted note faded into an oppressive silence. The rest of the shift was a blur of fear. I worked quickly, wanting only to finish and get out. My last task was to take the trash to the dumpster out back, which meant walking past the rear emergency exit. As I approached, a soft tapping started on the other side of the metal door. Tap, tap, tap. A woman's voice, muffled and panicked, called out. Hello? Is anyone there? Please, I'm locked out, and I lost my phone. My hand went to the panic bar. This was different. This was a real person. Rule 4 felt cruel and abstract now. I couldn't just leave her out there. Hello? I called back, my voice shaking. Oh, thank God, she cried, her voice filled with relief. Can you please open the door? It's so dark out here. She sounded young and genuinely terrified. I was about to push the bar when she spoke again, her voice changing, becoming sweeter, almost hypnotic. I knew you'd help me, Leo. I knew you were a good person. Please, Leo. Let me in. I froze. My name? How could she possibly know my name? The metallic tang in the air was stronger here. It wasn't a person. It was a thing. A trap. They are not in danger. You are. I stumbled backward, dropping the trash bag. I turned and ran, not stopping until I was back in the relative safety of the brightly lit lobby, my heart hammering against my ribs. When my shift ended and I went to clock out, I saw a small, folded piece of paper taped to the door of my locker. It hadn't been there when I arrived. On it, in Mr. Blackwood's spidery handwriting, were two simple words: good choice. For the next week, I was the perfect employee. I became a creature of pure obedience, a ghost who only existed between midnight and dawn. The rules were no longer a joke, they were scripture. I never glanced at Theater 2. I kept my headphones in, playing bland podcasts to drown out any potential carnival music from the intercom. I took the long way around to the dumpster, avoiding the rear emergency exit like it was radioactive. I was surviving. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't just cleaning a theater. I was moving through the belly of a sleeping beast, and I was terrified of waking it up. It was during my third week that I met her. I was refilling the paper towel dispenser in the men's room when a voice behind me made me jump so hard I nearly dropped the entire stack. "You're Leo." I spun around to see a young woman leaning against the doorway. She couldn't have been much older than me, with tired, knowing eyes and her hair pulled back in a messy bun. She wore the same drab gray uniform as me, though hers was faded and worn, as if she'd been wearing it for years. I had never seen her before. Mr. Blackwood had never mentioned another employee. Yeah. Who are you?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. "Ilara." She didn't offer a handshake. She just watched me, her expression unreadable. "You've been doing well. You followed the rules. You didn't look in the theater, and you didn't let the woman in." My stomach churned. How did she know that? Were you watching me? A small, sad smile touched her lips. "Everyone is watching, Leo. The building, it watches. It tests. And Mr. Blackwood, he watches to see if you pass." She pushed herself off the doorframe and took a step closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "You have to understand, the list he gave you isn't finished. The rules aren't static. They grow. The theater learns what scares you, what tempts you, and it adds to the list." I just stared at her, my mind reeling. "The theater learns?" Before I could form a question, she gave me an order. It was quiet, but it had the weight of a command. "Go to Theater 7. The emergency exit light on the left side is flickering. It needs to be jiggled." I checked the laminated card in my pocket, my fingers tracing the 7 rules I had memorized. There was nothing about maintenance, nothing about Theater 7 at all. "That's not on my list," I said, my voice barely audible. "I know," Ilara said, her eyes boring into mine. "This is a new one, an unwritten one. You need to listen to them, too." And then, as silently as she appeared, she was gone. I checked the hallway, but it was empty. Rame. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs. Was this another test? A trick? But something in her tired eyes felt real. I grabbed a small stepladder from the supply closet and made my way to Theater 7. The silence in the hallway felt profound, a heavy blanket pressing in on me. I pushed open the door and stepped inside. The massive room was pitch black, except for the tiny red glow of the 2 emergency exit signs. As she'd said, the one on the left was flickering erratically, casting the rows of empty seats in a pulsing, demonic light. In each flash, I could see the seats perfectly. And in each flash, I saw that every single cup holder was full. I took a hesitant step closer, my curiosity overriding my fear. They weren't filled with old soda cups. In the strobing red light, I saw glints of white. I leaned over a seat in the back row and felt bile rise in my throat. Every cup holder was filled to the brim with human teeth. A sound started then, a faint, collective whisper that seemed to come from all the empty seats at once. It wasn't in English, just a sibilant, hissing chorus of sound. I didn't wait to hear more. I stumbled backward out of the theater, slamming the door shut behind me. I abandoned the stepladder in the hall and practically sprinted back to my cleaning cart, my mind screaming. When I got there, something new was sitting on top of my bucket of soapy water. It was another laminated card, cut to the same size and printed in the same stark font as the first one. It had appeared from thin air. It read, Rule 8. If a task is not on your official list, but you feel a strong compulsion to complete it, do so without hesitation. Your intuition is now a part of your duties. Ilara was right. The theater was learning. And now, it was inside my head. After meeting Ilara, my nights were poisoned with a new kind of dread. It wasn't just about following the 7 rules anymore. Now I was constantly second-guessing myself, trying to listen for that intuition she'd mentioned, that quiet whisper from the building itself. Every flicker of a light, every creak of a floorboard felt like a potential command, a new, unwritten rule I was expected to follow. I hadn't seen Ilara since that night in the bathroom, and her absence made it all worse. I was alone, navigating a maze that was actively rewriting itself around me. The silence in the theater was no longer empty. It was watchful. My mistake happened on a Tuesday. It was a stupid, careless mistake born from exhaustion and a moment of weakness. I was pushing my cart down the main hall, the squeak of the wheels the only sound in the world, when I passed Theater 4. From under the door, I heard something. It wasn't a whisper or a knock. It was the faint, tinny sound of dialogue from an old movie. Curiosity is a dangerous thing in a place like this, but the sound was so normal. It was a lifeline to the real world, a reminder of what this building was supposed to be. I told myself I wouldn't open the door. I'd just peek through the small, circular window. Just a glance. That was my first error. I leaned in, cupping my hands around my eyes. A black and white film was playing on the massive screen. A lone man in a trench coat was walking on a desolate, rocky beach. The theater was empty. Relieved, I started to pull away, but as I did, a piece of paper materialized on the door, stuck right over the window as if it had grown from the wood itself. It was another rule. If a film is discovered playing in Theater 4, you must enter and watch until the credits roll. My blood turned to ice. It wasn't a choice. The theater had seen me look, and now it had given me an order. With a trembling hand, I pushed the door open and walked inside, the sound of the film suddenly surrounding me in perfect, crisp stereo. I chose a seat in the very back row, as far from the screen as possible, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm. For what felt like an eternity, I just watched. The man on screen walked endlessly along the shore. There was no music, just the sound of crashing waves and the crunch of his shoes on the pebbles. Then he stopped. He stood perfectly still for a long moment, his back to the camera. My whole body tensed. This wasn't right. Slowly, unnaturally, he began to turn. He didn't turn to face the camera. He kept turning, his head twisting past his shoulder, his gaze moving across the silver screen until he was looking directly out into the empty theater. Directly at me. His face was a smooth, featureless blur, a void in the shape of a head. The sound of the waves intensified, becoming a deafening roar. The screen flared with a blinding white light, and the world dissolved into nothing. I woke up with a gasp, sprawled on the cold, tiled floor of the main lobby. The harsh, fluorescent lights hummed above me. I sat up, my head pounding. I had no idea how I got here. Then I felt the cold seeping into my socks. I looked down. My shoes were gone. Taped to the front of my cleaning cart was a folded note. Mr. Blackwood's handwriting. You left too early. I hadn't left. I'd blacked out, but to the theater it was the same thing. I had failed the test. And for my failure I was given 2 new rules, freshly laminated, and waiting for me on top of my supply bucket. Rule 9. If the figure in Theater 4's film stands up, you have 5 seconds to leave the auditorium. Do not look back. Rule 10. The man from the screen will sometimes appear in reflections. Pay him no mind. He only wants your attention." My shift was almost over. Shaking, I finished my work in my socks, feeling exposed and violated. As I was wiping down the popcorn machine, I saw him. In the curved, greasy reflection of the glass, a tall figure in a trench coat stood right behind me, his face a horrifying blank. I didn't scream. I didn't turn around. I just held my breath, closed my eyes, and kept wiping. Just like the rule said. He only wanted my attention, and I had already given him far too much. The laminated rules were gone. In their place, left neatly on my cleaning cart one night, was a small, black, leather-bound notebook. Its pages were blank, save for the first one, where all the previous rules had been meticulously copied in Mr. Blackwood's spidery script. The theater was no longer just giving me directives, it was keeping a journal of my torment. The game had changed. It wasn't just about the building anymore, it was about me. The phenomena began to burrow into my own skin, targeting my life, my memories. It started with my shadow. I first noticed it in the long, empty hallway leading to theaters 5 and 6. Under the stark fluorescent lights, my shadow seemed to lag a half-second behind me, its movement sluggish and heavy. I'd stop, and it would slowly catch up, melting back into place at my feet. I tried to ignore it, another trick of the light in this awful place. Then, the notebook updated itself. I found it open on the concession stand, a new rule written in fresh, dark ink. Rule 11. If your shadow separates or freezes, do not panic. Walk to Theater 1, take a seat in the center of the middle row, and wait. Do not turn around until you feel your shadow return. Nuckin. The very next night, it happened. As I walked down that same hallway, my shadow stopped dead. I kept walking for 3 more steps before I realized I was alone, my physical form untethered from its dark twin on the floor. A cold dread, heavier than anything I'd felt before, washed over me. I could feel a presence behind me, in the space between me and my frozen shadow. It was vast and ancient and utterly indifferent to my terror. My hands shaking, I followed the rule. I walked away from my own shadow, entered the pitch-black void of Theater 1, and found the center seat. I sat there, rigid, staring at the blank screen, feeling the weight of that unseen thing in the seat directly behind me. I could feel its focus on the back of my neck. After an eternity that was probably only 10 minutes, I felt a familiar coolness at my heels, a subtle shift in the darkness. The presence was gone. My shadow was mine again. Clois. The attacks grew more intimate. A few nights later, as I passed the lost and found cabinet, a voice whispered from inside it. It was a perfect imitation of my own. "Did you forget something, Leo?" it murmured. I jumped back, my heart seizing in my chest. When I looked at the notebook a few minutes later, Rule 12 was there. The lost and found is for items, not conversations. Do not answer it. The worst violation came from Theater 6. The sound of a projector whirring to life made me flinch, a clear breach of Rule 6. But I felt that now familiar compulsion, the unwritten command to investigate. I pushed the door open to find a home movie playing on the giant screen. My home movie. It was my 7th birthday party. The footage was grainy, the colors faded, but it was unmistakably my childhood living room, my parents smiling, a cake with 7 lit candles. A wave of profound homesickness washed over me. Then, the corruption began. A tall, shadowy figure stood in the corner of the room, a detail I'd never seen before. The audio of my family singing Happy Birthday, warped and slowed, turning into a funeral dirge. On the screen, my 7-year-old self turned away from the cake, looked past the camera, and stared directly out at me, sitting alone in the dark theater, a look of accusation on his face. I fled, the sound of that distorted song chasing me down the hall. Mau. I had to find Ilara. She was the only one who would understand, the only other person in this nightmare. I searched the entire theater, calling her name into the oppressive silence. Finally, in desperation, I went to Mr. Blackwood's office. He was there, arranging a set of old keys on his desk. "Mr. Blackwood, I need to find Ilara. I said, my voice cracking. He didn't look up. There's no one here by that name. Yes, there is. She works here. The other night cleaner, I insisted, my voice rising with panic. He finally raised his head, his eyes fixing on that empty space behind me. His voice was as cold and empty as a vacant theater. We haven't had a cleaner named Elara in a very long time, Leo. The last person we had with that name, she broke a rule. Mr. Blackwood's words echoed in the silence of my mind for days. She broke a rule. The statement was a death sentence. Elara wasn't just gone. She had been erased. Her name was a ghost, a warning. I felt a profound, isolating loneliness settle over me. I was completely on my own now, trapped in a place that was actively trying to dismantle me, piece by piece. And now, it seemed the theater was growing tired of subtlety. It was beginning to dismantle itself, quietly by itself. The change started with the hallways. One night, the long corridor leading to the main theaters was suddenly a dead end, a blank wall where there should have been a path. I stood there, disoriented, my cleaning cart blocking my retreat. Panic set in. I turned around, and the hallway was back to normal, stretching out behind me as if nothing had happened. It was a glitch in the matrix, a skip on a record. But it was only the beginning. Doors started appearing where they shouldn't be. A small, bright yellow door, no bigger than a medicine cabinet, materialized on the wall of the women's restroom. A heavy, iron-bound door, like one from a medieval castle, stood for an hour at the end of the concession stand before vanishing. I learned to ignore them, to walk past them as if they weren't there, my heart pounding with the effort of feigning normalcy. The black notebook, my cursed Bible, returned. I found it lying open on the floor in the center of the lobby. 2 new rules were inked onto its pages, the ink still looking wet and dark. Rule 13. The building is dreaming. If your path is blocked, turn around and count to 13. Do not open your eyes until you finish counting. Rule 14. You may see a double of yourself from a distance. He may be cleaning or simply watching. Do not approach him. He remembers things you have forgotten. Why a sense? I saw him the very next night. I was at the top of the grand staircase that led to the upper lobby, polishing the brass handrail. I glanced down and saw him. It was me. Another Leo, dressed in the same uniform, was at the bottom of the stairs, mopping the floor. He moved with a weary slowness that I knew intimately. He looked up, and our eyes met across the distance. He didn't look surprised. He just gave me a slow, sad nod, as if acknowledging a shared burden, then went back to his work. He remembers things you have forgotten. The thought terrified me. What had this place stolen from my mind? What memories had I lost? The ultimate shift, the one that broke every logical foundation I was clinging to, happened on a Friday. I had just finished cleaning the last restroom and was heading back to the supply closet. I rounded the corner into the main hallway, and my breath caught in my throat. At the far end of the hall, where a blank wall had stood for every single shift I had ever worked, there was now a door. It was an ornate, double-door entrance, painted a deep, velvety red. A small, polished brass plaque was affixed to it. I didn't need to get closer to read it. I knew what it would say. Theater 9. Rule 7 flashed in my mind, a desperate, final warning. Theater 9 does not exist. If you see a door for it, you are overtired. Go home immediately. But I couldn't go home. I wasn't just overtired, I was being summoned. This felt like a destination, the final stop on this descent into madness. The air around the door hummed with a strange energy, a low thrum that vibrated through the soles of my sock-clad feet. A sudden, chilling thought broke through my paralysis. Mr. Blackwood. I had to tell him. The one constant in all this chaos was the manager in his office. I ran, my footsteps echoing unnervingly loud in the silent theater. I burst through the door to his office without knocking. I headed. It was empty. I headed. The desk was clear. The old keys were gone. The chair was pushed in neatly. There was no sign that anyone had been there at all. A thick layer of dust covered every surface, as if the room had been sealed for a generation. Mr. Blackwood had vanished. The last pillar of my sanity had crumbled, and I was alone with a door that wasn't supposed to be there. The disappearance of Mr. Blackwood felt like the snap of a tether. I was adrift in the madness, the theater's impossible architecture shifting around me like a nightmare. The door to Theater 9 loomed at the end of the hall. Not just a door, but a presence. A final, silent dare. I stood frozen in the empty office, my mind a screaming void, when a whisper cut through the silence. "Leo!" I spun around. Alara stood in the doorway, but this wasn't the tired, cynical girl I'd met in the bathroom. This was someone hollowed out by terror. Her eyes were wide, her face pale, and she looked as if she'd been running for days. "Alara, where have you been? Blackwood said you broke a rule?" she finished, a bitter, desperate laugh escaping her lips. "I did. I tried to leave. You can't leave, Leo. Not until your contract is up." She grabbed my arm, her fingers digging into my skin with surprising strength. "He's gone. Blackwood. He made a deal a long time ago to keep the theater fed. To keep it happy. But the deals here have an expiration date. The opening of Theater 9. That's what happens when the management position becomes vacant. It needs a new manager. It requires a sacrifice to seal the pact." My blood ran cold. "A sacrifice?" She didn't answer. Instead, she pushed something heavy and round into my hands. It was a metal film canister, cold to the touch. "You have to play this," she hissed, her eyes darting toward the hallway where the impossible theater awaited. "The projector in Theater 9 is already running. You have to thread this film before midnight. It's the only way." Before I could ask what was on it, she was gone, melting back into the shadows of the theater as if she were made of them. I was alone again, clutching the canister. My watch read 11:54 p.m. I had 6 minutes. My feet moved on their own, carrying me down the hall toward the velvet red doors. The low hum grew louder as I approached, a sound that resonated deep in my bones. I pushed the doors open and stepped inside. The air was thick and cold. A single projector beam cut through the darkness from a booth high above, aimed at the colossal screen. As Alara had promised, the projector was already running, the empty spools clicking and whirring, waiting. With trembling hands, I opened the canister. The film reel inside felt slick, almost organic. I climbed the ladder to the booth and threaded the film into the projector, my fingers fumbling with the unfamiliar mechanism. As the clock on my phone turned to 12 a.m., I flipped the switch. Light flooded the screen. It was surveillance footage, grainy and time-stamped just moments before. I was watching myself, on screen, climbing the ladder to the projection booth. I watched my own back as I threaded the film. It was a nauseating, impossible loop, we saw. Then, the footage cut. The screens in the lobby, which I could now see were visible from inside the theater, all flickered to life. Each one played a different scene, a different mistake. One screen showed me peeking into Theater 4. Another showed me frozen in terror as the carnival music played. A third showed my panicked flight from the woman behind the emergency exit. It was a highlight reel of my failures, a visual record of every rule I had bent or broken. The main screen in front of me changed to a final, horrifying scene. It was footage from inside Theater 9 itself, filmed from an angle high in the corner. It showed Mr. Blackwood, standing alone in the center of the vast, empty room. He looked up, his face a mask of resignation. A hulking, indistinct shadow detached itself from the far wall, a formless mass of pure darkness. It flowed toward him, silent and inevitable. Mr. Blackwood didn't scream as it enveloped him. He just dissolved. The screens all went black. A single spotlight illuminated my cleaning cart, which had somehow appeared at the foot of the stage. On it was a single piece of paper, like a flyer for a movie. It read, "Now showing, the final performance, starring Leo. Admission, 1. The curtain on the stage began to rise. Behind it, I could see row upon row of seats. stretching back into an impossible, endless darkness. The auditorium was filled with a silent audience of indistinct, shadowy figures. And there, standing center stage, waiting for me, was Mr. Blackwood. My feet felt like lead weights, but the theater pulled me forward. It was no longer a choice. I walked out of the projection booth, down the aisle, and onto the stage, the spotlight following me like a prison guard's beam. The air was thick with the silent, suffocating attention of the audience. Thousands of shadowy figures sat in the impossible, endless auditorium of Theater 9, their collective gaze a physical weight. On the stage, Mr. Blackwood stood waiting. He looked translucent, like a fading photograph, his three-piece suit wavering at the edges. "Welcome, Leo," he said, his voice no longer dry and raspy, but echoing with a strange, spectral resonance. "Every contract has a closing performance, a final review. My own was many years ago." He gestured to the silent crowd. "They are the true owners, the patrons. They consume stories, you see, not of films, but of lives, of fear and mistakes and regret." He looked at me, his gaze for the first time seeming to truly see me, and there was a flicker of something that might have been pity in his fading eyes. "The previous manager's story is over. A new one must begin. The notebook requires a final rule to close the volume." He held out the small, black, leather-bound notebook. It was open to the last page, which was completely blank. A pen lay beside it. "You must write the final rule, Leo, the rule that concludes your performance as an employee." My mind raced. What could I possibly write? A rule to set me free? A rule to burn this place to the ground? But I knew it wouldn't work. The theater played by its own logic. This wasn't a negotiation. It was a transition. I looked at the silent, waiting audience, at the fading form of Mr. Blackwood, and I understood. This wasn't an escape. It was an ascension. A condemnation. I took the pen. My hand didn't shake. I knew what I had to write. It was the only rule that fit the scene. I wrote a simple sentence on the blank page. Hosim a betray. Rule 15. When the curtain rises, you must perform. The moment the last letter was written, the notebook burst into silent, cold flames in my hands, turning to ash that scattered into nothingness. Mr. Blackwood gave a slow, final nod. The performance may now begin. I didn't have a script. I didn't need one. The stage compelled me. I opened my mouth and my life spilled out. I spoke of my layoff, of my desperation scrolling through Craigslist. I confessed my fear the first time I heard the carnival music, the selfish relief I felt when I slammed the door on the voice begging for help. I described the terror of seeing my own double, the violation of watching my childhood memories curdle on screen. I confessed every mistake, every moment of weakness, every dark thought I'd ever had, both inside the theater and out. I performed my life, editing nothing, hiding nothing. The silent audience drank it all in. They didn't applaud. They didn't move. They just accepted it. When my voice was raw and I had nothing left to give, a profound silence fell over the stage. The shadowy figures in the audience began to dissolve, fading like smoke until the endless auditorium was once again empty. Mr. Blackwood looked at me, his form now barely visible. "Nia, they have accepted your story," he whispered, his voice a distant echo. "The performance is over. The position is filled." He smiled, a genuine, tired smile. "Good luck, Leo." And with that he faded completely, leaving nothing but the lingering scent of dust and old paper. The stage lights went out. The world went black. I awoke with a jolt, sitting in a worn leather chair. I was in the manager's office, but it was no longer dusty and abandoned. The keys were neatly arranged on the polished desk. A fresh cup of coffee sat steaming beside a brand new, empty black notebook. The air was clean. The building was quiet, but it was a different kind of quiet. It wasn't sleeping, it was waiting. Waiting for my direction. On top of the new notebook was a single, folded piece of paper. I already knew what it was. It was the first page of a new chapter. My chapter. I unfolded it, and read the single sentence written in my own handwriting. It was the first rule I would have to enforce. Rule 1. Never let them know you're afraid.